When the sun has set on a Friday night, bringing peace into your home, families will gather all around singing Shabbat Shalom. Everybody sing Shalom, Shalom. Shalom, Shalom. Is a gift from God, so put a smile upon your face. He's got the whole world in his hands, so obey his commands and you will know peace. Shalom, Shalom, Shabbat Shalom.
Yalai la lai lai, yalai la lai lai, yalai la lai lai, yalai la 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 lai, yalai la lai 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 lai, yalai la lai lai, yalai la la lai. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Yalai la lai lai, Yalai la lai lai, Yalai la lai lai, Yalai la 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 lai. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you for Shabbat, along with my wonderful colleague, Rabbi Ron Goldberg from the Eisenberg Village campus. How are you doing, Rabbi Ron?
I'm well. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
So glad to be with you. Well, why don't we begin? We have so much to share that we've been talking about that, and we're going to do in a few minutes. But let's begin with the blessing over the candles for Shabbat, and I will light the lights. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Shel Shabbat, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner. Shel Shabbat, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'achem l'shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei Amlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Ron and I would love to offer you a blessing on this Shabbat. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May Adonai guard and protect you.
Yaher Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka.
May Adonai turn his face to you.
Yisa Adonai panav elecha V'yasem lecha shalom.
And I always feel the most important blessing of all, that God grants us all the blessing of peace.
Amen. Ken Yeh Ratzon. Well, it's time for the Kiddush, and Rabbi Ron and I are going to do it together. I'm going to do the preamble, which is from that last day of creation, and then Rabbi Ron will pick up with the bracha. Yom HaShishi v'aychulu hashamayim v'aretz v'chol tzva'am. Vaychal Elohim b'yom hashvi'i melachto asher asa vayishbot b'yom hashim komoto asher asa vayvarech Elohim et yom hashiv v'kadesh oto kivo shavad mikol melato asher bara Elohim lasot savrin rabbanan v'rabotai
L'chaim, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho v'avahu v'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron l'maaseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila l'mikra'ei kodesh zecher litziat Mitzrayim ki vanu v'acharta Ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim ve'shabbat kodshecha ve'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashabbat.
Amen. L'chaim.
L'chaim.
Well, in honor of true transparency, I got to tell you that sometimes when Rabbi Ron and I are preparing for these Shabbatot, we don't necessarily have a fresh challah available. So I had this idea of getting this challah that we could use in case we didn't have a fresh one. And I ended up kind of accidentally getting a box of all kinds of bread. So I've got this pretzel. I've got this breadstick. Okay. Feel free to respond, Rabbi Ron, if there's anything that you want to say about these. I've got a slice of rye bread.
No, the rye bread I like.
You do like rye bread?
Absolutely. With some cream cheese and some lox, it's outstanding.
Okay, so this is going to come as a shock to you. I love rye bread. That won't come as a shock. I absolutely love rye bread. I really do. I love it with honey. And I also love it with avocado, okay? However, I have an aversion.
How California of you.
Very California, yes. Well, and then suddenly avocado toast becomes trendy. And I'm like, I've been having that my whole life. My father grew up with an avocado tree in Israel. But I have a weird aversion that I should confess. I have an aversion to caraway seeds. So I can only have seedless rye. All right, this seems to be pita bread. I know it looks almost like eggs. I don't know what the heck is going on. Okay, now this kit also came with a French baguette. Nice. It also came with, I can't pronounce this correctly because I don't speak French, but a croissant. And finally, it came with a saltine cracker. I remember eating these when I was pregnant because it made me not feel nauseous during that first trimester. And then there's even a matzah that comes in this kit. Is that hilarious? This is, these all came in this. Yes, I meant to just buy a challah. But anyway, it also comes with a challah. But when I was purchasing this online, I was not 100% confident. So I also got this challah, which I think is if you hide the tag, it almost looks real, sort of. It's plush. My dog would love this. Anyway, we're going to have to say motzi over these. So here I go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat Shalom. Yes, B'teavon. Thank you so much. Well, this is a very exciting week. I mean, we had our election this week, and so much is going on. But as rabbis, we want to focus on Torah because we're in the time of year where the Torah portions are so interesting, so rich, so exciting. And this week's Torah portion is called Vayera. And it is just filled with stories. Rabbi Ron, what is your favorite of the different episodes that go on in Vayera? What's your favorite story?
I'm going to go with leadoff. The Lech Lecha, the parsha last week, ends with the Brit Milah of Ishmael and Avraham. And we have him beginning this parsha sitting at the opening of his tent, watching people pass by, and he has the three visitors. And I find that's such a fascinating story, both hospitality and the purpose of the visitors. I enjoy that part of it.
Yes, and it's true. The rabbis take two mitzvot from that visit. They take the mitzvah of hospitality and also of Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, because just imagine an adult circumcision that Abraham had to endure. And there he is recovering, and these three visitors or angels, maybe representatives of God, that it's truly a mitzvah to visit with someone, or even just to call them, and to put it in modern terms, when they're not well. So my favorite story in this Torah portion is the famous story of Sodom and Gomorrah. These are two cities where people were acting so horribly that God decides to destroy the two cities. And what's so tender, as intense as that is, what's so tender about the story is what it tells us about the charming relationship between God and Abraham. God has so much respect for Abraham that God is afraid to tell Abraham what God is about to do. And God says to God's self, should I tell Abraham that I'm about to destroy the cities? And then decides, sure, almost like you're about to do something, and should you tell your best friend? Should you tell your spouse? Should you tell your loved one? Or do you sort of keep it to yourself? And God says to Abraham, listen, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are so horrible that I have to destroy them. And Abraham models for us, speaking what they used to call in the 60s, truth to power, and unabashedly, unafraid, says to God, well, hang on a minute. You, the great God of all of the universe, you would destroy these cities. Have you checked? Maybe there are 50 good people there. And God ponders and says, well, okay, if you can find 50 good people, I won't destroy the cities. And then Abraham starts to bargain down from there, eventually down to 10. I mean, Abraham's own nephew, Lot, lives there. And God is convinced by Abraham's passion that if Abraham can find 10 good people in Sodom and Gomorrah, that God will not destroy the cities. But then, unfortunately, Abraham cannot.
Which I like a lot, but to me, it's like a foreshadowing. Because what do we call the Jewish people? Yisrael. We wrestle with God. And Abraham's grandson is going to wrestle with God, from which we take our name of Yisrael. And then who's our greatest prophet? Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses. And what does he do constantly? God wants to wipe out the Jewish people, and you know what? I'm going to wipe them out and start over with you. And Moses says, no, don't do that. It's such a brilliant foreshadowing of who the Jewish people are going to become. We're going to wrestle with God. We're going to wrestle with the commandments. I like that a lot.
Me too. And, you know, I really think it's a precursor to what would become the Yiddish word of chutzpah. In other words, we don't cower. We're not passive. We're not afraid. We speak out. And if you can speak out to God in the face of what you perceive to be injustice, then you should certainly be prepared to speak out against any leader, even someone who has power over you, you know, a political leader, whatever it is. You should have the courage to speak out. And that's kind of an undercurrent, in a way you could say, of Jewish thought. In this very same Torah portion, though, I mean, I cannot believe that the tradition was able to squeeze so much into one Torah portion. Mm-hmm. We also have the famous story of the Akedah, which is the binding of Isaac. And people tend to be familiar with that story, if for no other reason than the rabbi selected it to be read on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. So even Jewish people who don't tend to go to synagogue on Shabbat, if they showed up for Rosh Hashanah over the years, they probably heard the story of the binding of Isaac. And I find that story to be fascinating. It's a little disturbing. What do you think, Rabbi?
Disturbing's a really good word. I know as a young child, I was terrified of it. You know, I was, you know, talk about transference. I was totally terrified of the idea of a father sacrificing a son. Totally terrifying.
Yeah, and you know, you can look at it from both points of view. You can look at it from the point of view of the child. You know, according to the Torah, They go on their, when Abraham almost sacrifices Isaac and then instead is asked by the angel representing God to sacrifice the ram in the thicket, that after that whole episode, Isaac goes this way and Abraham goes that way, and we don't know if they ever speak again. It doesn't seem that they do, which kind of makes some sense. What do you think, Rabbi?
Oh, it does actually. I mean, how do you recover from that? And then I was also thinking that that idea of here Abraham just wrestled with God and argued with God for the sake of Sodom and Gomorrah, but God says, and this is such great literature. Take your son, your only son, the son that you love. By the way, that's Isaac, in case there was any, unclarity or ambiguity. That's great literature. And then he doesn't negotiate. He doesn't say, wait, God, Sodom and Gomorrah, Isaac. It doesn't happen. And that, to me, is a puzzlement. And it's the brilliance of our forefathers being human.
Right, and it gets us to wrestle with Torah too, because no one's going to just look at this Torah portion and be comfortable with it. I had a teacher, a rabbi, who one time said that the reason that this Torah portion resonates so much is because most parents have had a fantasy of throwing their own child out the window at some point in their parenting life. I think that's a little harsh, but it is hard to be a parent, and everyone who's been a parent has had a great privilege. My mother says that children are the spice of life, but you don't get a lot of ticker tape parades for your parenting. Kids don't wake up in the morning and say, thank you for disciplining me, thank you for raising me with love and food and all these other things. So you have to really nurture yourself as a parent. And so this kind of psychological reading where maybe people kind of have a fantasy about almost, wanting to, lay hands on their children, but don't do it in the end. Historians also think that this might have been Judaism's way of condemning infanticide, I guess it's called. Yeah. That there were other parallel religions that were actually offering babies and children to their gods. And that it's almost as if the Torah portion is saying, if you or someone like you, Abraham, actually think that God would want you to sacrifice your child, it's in your head, and it's not really the case. Our God, the God of Israel, Adonai, Elohim, whatever you want to call our God, God has many names, does not actually want us to harm our children. Nothing matters more than protecting our children.
Oh, absolutely. Though I was thinking about, talking about parenting and parenthood. Don't we both understand our own parents better now that we've raised our own children? And now I understand that parental curse when my father and mother would say, may you have children just like you. It makes so much more sense now.
Yes. And I have to say, when people ask me about my parents, I always respond that I have an embarrassment of riches. I'm very, very lucky to have had amazing parents who are still alive and well, thank God, and healthy. And I'm super lucky. I am. And I recognize that most people walk around with some sort of injury from their childhood, things that were said or done to them that hurt them and that they can't quite get over or they struggle to get over. And then sometimes once we raise our own children, we become generous and forgiving. Anyway, I think that the secret to having successful relationships as an adult in every direction is having a great capacity to forgive. If we can forgive our parents, and you know what, even forgive our children. Some people, some of our own residents have a hard time forgiving their children for not visiting enough, for not calling enough, for any kind of disappointment they may have had. We have to forgive our parents and our children and our spouses and our siblings and so on and so on. Whether, for example, in the cases of our parents, whether they're still around or whether they've passed, it's really helpful to be empathetic and try to be understanding and generous as we assess these people who are so significant in our lives.
The Agadah, when Mashiach comes, what's the first thing Mashiach is going to do? Create peace between parents and children. So what you're saying totally makes sense in our tradition.
Right. And what's that old Jewish joke that grandparents and grandchildren famously get along really well, right?
Right.
And grandparents have nachas. They don't have to do the hard work of the raising and the changing diapers. And grandchildren tend to adore their grandparents. So they say, what's the secret in this special relationship between grandchildren and grandparents? And the answer is they share a common enemy. Right. I've also heard Rabbi Ben-Zion Bergman, may he rest in peace, the wonderful rabbi, used to say that grandchildren are your reward for not having killed your children.
Oh, for the win. For the win. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. All right. Anything else you want to say about the Torah portion, Vayera, Rabbi Ron?
As you said earlier, the books of Genesis, really are such great literature and such great life lessons. We could plumb this one a little bit further. If you're into angels, the three visitors, okay, there's so many different lessons there. You mentioned hospitality already, but talking about angels specifically, each of those angels, each one had their own specific mission. Why three? One was to heal Abraham. He, after all, just had his Brit Milah the week before. One was to let them know about the coming birth of Yitzchak, of Isaac. And the third angel's job was to overthrow the two cities. So they each had a job to do. So it's fascinating to dig deeper into the Parsha and to see what our sages saw in between the words.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And yes, and those angels are also they're shlichim in a way too. They're messengers, right? And representatives. Yeah. And that kind of reminds all of us of different times that we've been messengers. I think of all the residents at the Jewish home as angels of sorts. And I think of all of our staff as angels of sorts in the sense of having some sort of role as caregiver or messenger to others. And there's so much power in that. It's hard to think of yourself as an angel, but consider it for a minute. Consider the possibility that you were sent here to do something nice, to take care of another, and it may just be true. Well, thanks, Rabbi Ron, for that wonderful discussion. And I agree that the book of Genesis is just filled with fantastic stories of imperfect people, but interesting ancestors of ours. And we'll be looking at the Torah portions in the week to come. But now we're really going to be getting ready to say Shabbat Shalom. And before we do, how about this song? Adama v'shamayim, chom ha'esh, tzlil ha'mayim, ani margish begufi, beruchi v'nishmati. Hey, 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 ho. Hey, 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 ho. Hey, 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 ha. Hey, 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 ho. Adama v'shamayim, chom ha'esh, tzlil ha'mayim, ani margish begufi, beruchi v'nishmati. It's talking about Adama, the earth, and the heavens, the warmth of the fire, the ringing of the waters. I feel all of nature in my body, in my spirit, and in my soul. Hey, 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 oh. Hey, 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 oh. Hey, 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 ha. Hey, 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 ho. Shiru ladonai, shir chadash, shiru ladonai, kol haaretz. Yalai, lalai, lai, 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 lai. Yalai, lalai, lai, yalai, lalai, lai. Sing with me. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Yalai, ya lai la lai lai, ya lai la lai lai, ya la lai la 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 lai. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Are you ready to say Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Ron? It's almost dinner time.
I hate to say goodbye, but Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone, from our offices and our hearts and our homes to yours. Shabbat Shalom, with love, Shabbat Shalom.
When the sun has set on a Friday night, bringing peace into your home, families will gather all around singing Shabbat Shalom. Everybody sing Shalom, 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 Shalom.